So the Illinois ICAPS Team Teaching Continuum. Presented by Bevan Gibson, Sarah Goldammer, and Amy Julian. The reason and the purpose for this webinar today is to really show you and go over the way in which Illinois is shaping team teaching. Many of you came in under accelerated opportunities, and for the last several years we have been operating with the 6 models of team teaching. As we are really defining what ICAPS is for Illinois and what this model looks like in Illinois, we are moving forward to really define the way in which we look at team teaching. We sat down as a leadership team and came up with this continuum, and it is really a progression of the 6 models. I assure you, all of you, and where you are within your team teaching practices currently will fit in a particular place within the model, but it does also show the continuum allows for growth and shows the growth in which is the expectation.
All right, so let's review a little bit what is team teaching. It is, of course, a required component of ICAPS, and it's a partnership of 2 teachers, our CTE and adult education teacher, working together to integrate instruction. And so, as Amy mentioned, this is a continuation what we've learned from 3+ years with accelerating opportunity and what's worked well in our state. And we're kind of moving beyond that. So one of the things that we've learned is that a major part of success in the ICAPS program is effective team teaching. So you've got to have that really effective partnership between those 2 teachers. And to have that, there needs to be a minimum of 50% overlap of instruction. So maybe 25% of that's planning and 25% is the classroom, or there's other combinations. And what we found is some programs were really very effective that had more overlap. So that's just the minimum is 50%. Also mandatory is a separate support class led by the basic skills instructor, the adult education instructor, who gives kind of that background information, support, and enhances what the CTE instructor is sharing. So the recommendations that are coming in, once again, this comes from several years now of experience, is that the basic skills instructor audit the CTE course the term prior to beginning the team teaching, or the other thing they could do is 100% overlap of instruction for the first term of team teaching. And what we found is that observing and planning time is really important to be able to set the stage. It's kind of a prep time, and 6 months is kind of a good indication of what's needed to really give that background information to make sure that teachers are ready to move forward as effectively as possible in their team teaching.
So successful team teaching, and if you're not aware, we have several resources on the ICAPS website as well as the Transitions Academy website that have video support for what is successful team teaching. Successful team teaching is a commitment to thoughtful integration of both instructors' expertise to best serve the students. Throughout the literature on team teaching, certain key elements appear to characterize successful team teaching. Open and ongoing communication is key to successful team teaching. Being able to share your syllabi, discuss classroom conduct, classroom practices, and classroom discipline is essential for successful team teaching. A shared commitment to making team teaching at the professional relationship work. The idea that personalities do play a role, and really having both members of the team willing and able to commit to this relationship is very important. Flexibility in all relationships is essential, but mostly in team teaching it is very essential for individuals to be able to be flexible not only with their schedules but with their guidance and the way in which they've conducted class, because you are really mingling and mixing 2 different classrooms together. Compatible approaches to team teaching and learning. So as I mentioned earlier, within the state of Illinois, we have sat down and we have looked at the idea of team teaching, and we came up with the team teaching continuum. The first stage being observing and planning. As Sarah mentioned, this is ideally a 6-month period where the adult basic education instructor is observing the career and tech ed class or planning with the career and tech ed class, looking at the way in which team teaching will be implemented as they merge the coursework. Stage 2 is traditional team teaching, and this is the same idea that comes out of traditional ways in which we have done team teaching under those 6 models. And then the third stage is collaborative integrated teaching, and this is really the traditional team teaching evolving into a set of teachers that have taught together for a length of time and are familiar and comfortable with one another. This is an example of the model.
So let's unpack a little bit the different stages that Amy laid out for you. Stage 1, the observing and planning. And for those of you that are familiar with the 6 models, if you went through that training by NCTN, you might see this as some of the monitoring. So it's a little bit different than that, but if you see some similarities, I just want to mention that to you. And this is where you're in the gate. You're preparing for team teaching. And the CTE instructor assumes the responsibility for instructing the entire class. And the adult ed instructor, the basic skills instructor, maybe circulates around the room, looks and makes sure that the students are understanding, and then kind of gives some feedback. And we see that a lot in the state, and it's been very effective, and it's a good beginning stage for team teaching, because then the adult education teacher can maybe ask questions that the students may or may not be able to either formulate, or maybe they don't feel comfortable asking, and also just kind of clarifying in different words sometimes what the information is that the CT instructor is providing. Another helpful way to think about this is that being able, for the adult education instructor, thinking about what kinds of questions, especially if you're in that auditing part of it, if you're sitting in there saying, okay, if I was a student, what questions would I have? And maybe writing those out and talking about them with the CTE instructor, because another part of observing and planning is that the team teachers communicate and decide in advance what type of information is going to be gathered, and make it a deliberate part of the lesson and not just incidental checks. And so especially in thinking about the evolution of team teaching, as Amy mentioned, people kind of move along in the process. Early on, as you're forming that communication, that trust, it's really important to sit down and talk about how are we going to make this flow in a way that works for our students. That being able to just kind of play off of each other, and that ebb and flow, give and take communication, that's what we want to get to eventually as two teams become more familiar and comfortable with each other. But at the beginning, it's really important that there's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of thought, there's a lot of communication.
And as they progress through the observing and planning stage, they move into traditional team teaching. Traditional team teaching is defined as a CTE and basic skills instructor sharing instruction. The CTE instructor will teach the content. The basic skills instructor provides support, modeling learning strategies, and takes charge of providing follow-up activities on related topics and study skills. This is really the progression of the observing and planning time. And this is very common throughout the state as a team teaching model. As we move from traditional team teaching, the next stage would be collaborative and integrated team teaching. This is where both teachers work together, exchanging and discussing ideas and theories, allowing the students to observe the progress. This is a point in which the teachers are both very well versed in the content, and there is not necessarily an expert among the two. The interactions are enhanced, the lessons, by dividing the perspectives, learning from each other, and how the two different perspectives could respectively disagree or agree. It allows for the content to be presented in different formulations and allows then for the teachers to really interact with the students. It also includes participation of students through small groups, student-led discussions, and joint processes. Though this is the most challenging stage of the team teaching continuum, it is the most exciting and engaging for the students. And
So here's the model that Amy showed you earlier. Let's kind of take a look at it a little bit again now that you've been through the different stages, and you see how they kind of flow together. And the model, this visual, for those of you who are visual learners, is to kind of help you think about how each stage builds on each other and kind of moves up the continuum. As Amy said, it's a little more complex. Most individuals aren't going to start in that stage 3, the collaborative integrated. They're going to need that observing and planning and moving on to some of the traditional team teaching and then moving up to the collaborative. And I want to just kind of draw a parallel there. So if you're an adult education teacher, your CTE instructor may have shared all of the content information, just as Amy and I talked about the 3 stages. Now you, as the basic skills instructor, might provide the visual, the kind of reaching out and thinking about the different learning styles in the classroom and saying, okay, someone might understand this better if we give them that same information, but in a different way. So that's part of the expertise that's brought into the classroom from the adult education teacher. And thinking about how the team teaching continuum works, let's just kind of unpack that a little bit more. It demonstrates where team teachers can be at a given point, and I think that's really a key part of this, is understanding that we're not going to stay in the same place that we've been. There's a lot of different factors that go into where team teachers might start in the process and where they might be as they go along. So one might be the progress in the process of development and implementation. And experience of one or both instructors. You may hit the jackpot at your program and you have 2 instructors who have a lot of background knowledge. Maybe they've even known each other before, so there's that level of trust. They can move up that continuum pretty quickly because they're ready to jump into that more integrated collaborative teaching. And maybe you have a new program where people don't really understand team teaching yet, so they're going to need to start at the very beginning and kind of really figure out what their role is. The basic skills instructor is going to need to understand the information that's given in that CTE class and those kinds of things. Also, as I mentioned, the level of comfort, trust, and integration between instructors. That most of the time, if they have not had a relationship before, it takes time to build that. They're not going to just jump into that. What might happen also as you move down the road is you have one or the other instructor leave, but one stays. So one part of the team's already very familiar. So their new partner, hopefully they're going to move along very quickly because one person's very experienced already. Or you may have 2 people who have been doing it for a long time, they've moved up the continuum, and then for whatever reason they can't, and you start up with 2 very new people. So again, you're going to probably be moving along this continuum back and forth depending on how each semester goes. And then lastly, the level of familiarity with course content. Some programs have hit the jackpot and they've had a basic skills instructor who's already been in the industry field before. I'm teaching adult education, but I used to be a sheet metal worker. So that person is going to move up the continuum much more quickly, plus the CTE instructor is going to have a level of comfort in what that basic skills instructor's background knowledge is. So they're going to move more quickly than someone who's really starting from square one. Oh. So that's the going through it and the information that we have for you. I think, Amy, are you going to turn off the mute and allow for questions and comments?
Yes, I would like to take this time now, and I'm going to unmute everyone. So if you're running the blender, please shut the blender off. And all of you should be unmuted. It's going to cause a little, possibly, let's do this a different way. If we have questions, can we raise our hands? Because I think otherwise that's going to create a lot of back noise, and I apologize for my not thinking that through. If anyone has questions,
though, Amy, on the fly.
Yes, there we go.
We applaud you.
If we have any questions, if anyone raise your hand, it's just your little hand icon there, and there we go. Christina Hutchinson, you are unmuted.
Yeah, I know you said the first session, the first stage was like a 6 months. Other time requirements in there, or is it just as that trust builds? And I know we can't stay in stage 1 forever, but what the time frames would you look for?
So Christina, that's a good question, and that 6 months is a recommendation. There's going to be some programs that are ready to move on before 6 months, and certainly we don't want to hold them back. And the thought is to be moving up the continuum. If you know where you're headed, you're much more likely to get there. So that's just a recommendation that after 6 months, some type of relationship built that hopefully you're ready to move on.
And we also want it to be viewed as a continuum, so individuals and colleges realize that we don't have the expectation that right out of the gate they're going to just, here's Joe, here's Bob, and now they're team teaching and they're going to be at the traditional level within a week or two. We want, and we were very intentional and deliberate about having a planning and observing stage, so then that allows for that knowledge base building, that allows for that foundation of skill building, and it allows for that communication between instructors to take place, because all of those things are so essential to a successful team teaching model. Did that answer your question, Christina?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Does anyone else have a question? Anyone else want to raise their hand? We have a question that came in on the question panel. Where have you been doing that you have had success, and what classes? Jennifer, do you mind if I unmute you to elaborate on that? Jennifer, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me? I'm on the computer.
I can hear you just fine, yes.
Okay. And well, no, I was just wondering what colleges have you been doing this and had success, and what were the classes that you were doing it with? Like, I'm trying to do it with a precision machining, so I didn't know where you'd been doing it and what kind of classes it was in.
Well, it's been a requirement. Oh, I've got feedback. I'm going to mute you, Jennifer, sorry. It's been a requirement since the first original eight Accelerating Opportunities programs. So it has been done in a variety of classes and with a variety of instructors. And I don't know that there's been a specific model. I know if you watch the videos, we've talked about machining classes. We've talked about the accelerated math program has been one of the things that they focused on with Blackhawk and their programs. So Bevan, Sarah, do you have any other further examples?
Yeah, so I think also Elgin would be a model. They did welding. They also did some CNC operator. And at one time, Heartland had a nice program of team teaching going as well. And I'm trying, it was something in the manufacturing. I'm going to have to look that one up. I could send you that information, Jennifer. What I will say, though, because I think this is really important as we talk about this continuum, there have been some models, and Heartland's probably one, where those folks then are no longer team teaching. Somebody left and that kind of, so I just want to point that out, that there are some nice models, but usually as when you're working with people, people don't necessarily stay put. But also, Amy mentioned the resources. And what we'll do as a follow-up to this training is send out the team teaching menu of resources, and that gives you some video descriptions that we interviewed some folks, some team teachers across the state. Also, there's some best practices, some integrated instruction syllabus, so there's some models for you there. The other thing that's going to be coming down the pike very soon is another webinar that if you want, and this came out of the Transitions Academy, this was a suggestion that we actually go through those resources kind of one by one and lay them out. So if you're the type of person that just wants to see where they are and go from there, we can provide that for you. If you're the kind of person that really wants somebody to walk you through, that's going to be coming in the next couple of weeks. So be looking on the Transitions blog and other places to get that information.
So Jennifer, I've unmuted you. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
and
you.
I do know that Heartland, Josh just popped up that Heartland is a welding program. I know Lakeland had a welding program. So it really has varied with the programs, which class they focus on for the team teaching, but the program of study and the pathway is selected, and they've gone with a variety of different courses. our next question does kind of speak to that as well. Tasha Davis is asking, so would you recommend teachers stick together teaching, or how does the stages come into play when you change classes? Tasha, I'm going to unmute you, and do you have anything you need to add to that?
Yeah, just wondering, when we have the different sections like Fall 1, Fall 2, Fall 3, and you change instruction, it's kind of hard to build on the stages. So I'm just wondering, how would the stages come into play in such a short time frame when you're changing courses and changing instructors that you work together with as a team?
I think that would probably depend on the individuals involved. I think for most people, they would like to stay together, because I think the only way to build on this continuum is to spend time together, to have that partnership, to practice, because I think you're going to get better as you understand each other's kind of idiosyncrasies and how you work together. Now, realizing that may or may not be possible depending on the different courses that you're teaching, but I think for the team teaching model, having consistency and continuation would be helpful. If you can't do that, then at least one of the partners partnering up with somebody new, for instance, if there needs to be a different CTE instructor because of the content that you're sharing, then I think if you could at least keep one of them the same, that would be helpful.
And really what we found is so much of the success in team teaching is created by the relationship and the knowledge base and the content mastering. And so I, again, would encourage you to echo what Sarah said, to really keep those teachers together, because I think as the adult basic education instructor masters the content and you become familiar and you have that rapport, that's really going to enhance your team teaching and your delivery of the content. And we are well aware that every time any instructor delivers content for a class, it is unique. It is unique to the students that are in the classroom. It is unique to the experience and the knowledge base that those students bring in. So I know we've had some questions as to whether or not the team teacher or the support, the instructor who facilitates the support class should be in there, and I strongly feel that they should, because of the level of communication and collaboration that just really enhances the team teaching experience.
I agree.
Tasha, did that answer your question then?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to mute you again. Anyone else have a question, comment? Okay. I do want to thank you all for attending. I will be sending out, I have all your emails. You should have received yesterday, and I apologize for not leading with this. Yesterday I sent out the excerpt from the manual, from the ICAPS manual on the team teaching continuum. That is available on the ICAPS website. I will also be sending you, following this webinar, the team teaching menu of resources, so you can explore those. If you have not watched the videos, if you have not really played, if you will, within those resources, I really encourage you to do so. The movement to the continuum does not necessarily impact the resources that, or doesn't at all impact the resources that are available. So really good team teaching is good team teaching. I'm going to unmute Josh. If there are any policy questions or questions about grants or the grant, I'm going to give Josh an opportunity to answer any of those. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and Josh, I'm going to unmute you. Any questions for Josh today? Okay. With that, I thank you all very much for being in attendance and paying attention while we were conducting the webinar. If you have any questions for Bevan, Sarah, myself, or Josh, please always feel free to contact us. We are here as a resource for you and to help you execute this program. And we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you soon. Thank you. Any other closing comments, Sarah, Bevan?
No, we're just appreciate all of you being here today, and if you didn't hear at the beginning, Bevan kind of has laryngitis. That's why you didn't hear her. She's a little squeaky. Hello, everyone. There she is. There's your comic relief for the day, if you needed any.
All right. Thank you all very much and have a great day and a good weekend.